And what was the religion at the time? Like, did things start to change from mythology into actual religion during Rome?
I think those two things are very linked. The Romans are very religious people. They were very into ritual and sacrifice, and they took it really, really seriously. And when we look at the myths that they told about themselves, the first king of Rome is Romulus. And what was Romulus? Romulus was a warrior above all. And this is actually like what the Romans are above all. They are the children of Mars. They do war. They're really good at it. That's why they conquer the entire Mediterranean world. They're better at it than just about anybody else.
So it's a very masculine society?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the patriarchy like to the max. And they were very martial society and they're sort of
martial
society and like their political institutions are mirroring their military institutions, and the consul and their leaders are simultaneously, they're the political leader, but also the leader of the armed forces. This is actually what their job is.
Wow.
The other role of the consul, however,
the consul,
right, which is, one of the key leaders in the Republican era, is overseeing these critical sacrifices and critical rituals that the Romans felt that they had to perform and needed to do in order to stay on the right side of the gods. And that was the job of the political leadership, was to defend the city using the armies and to make sure that the gods were happy by making the proper sacrifices. And so the second king of Rome, this guy called Numa, he was all about religion. And so when they tell this story, they're like, the first guy is war, and then the second guy comes in and he's like, we need religion to like guide this in like an ethical way and like to make sure that we're not just like insane barbarians, that we actually like have an ethical and moral structure to our society. And those are the two things. And then the next, there's legendarily like 7 kings of Rome. Like there's 7 hills, there's 7 kings of Rome. Like, 7's a lucky number. It kind of always has been. And so when we talk about the 7 kings of Rome, there's like, it goes like warrior, religious guy, warrior, religious guy, warrior, religious guy, right, because those two things go hand in hand for
like
them.
one side, the other. So that's even still today in our society. Mm-hmm. It kind of seems like it's like there's two parties sort of, and it's one side, the other, one way, the other.
Yeah. And
what those sides and what they are change and their values change over time.
Yeah. And when we talk about them being a religious people, this is sort of pagan polytheistic religion. And so there were different gods, right? And we know these gods, a lot of them were borrowed from the Greeks. So it's Jupiter is Zeus, and there's, Minerva, and there's, Bacchus, and all of these, different gods that are out there. So they didn't have religion in the sense of like there was one thing that everybody did and was a part of, and everybody went to church on Sundays. There were different temples in different places, and like one city their patron would be Apollo, another city their patron would be Diana, right? Mm-hmm. And so it would change from time to place, and so they had this very open-mindedness towards religion and how you practiced religion. When they would come across a new society, and by come across I mean conquer, they would often incorporate those religions, or they would make sort of what they were doing, their religious sacrifices, their gods, and they would be like, oh, this is analogous to our thing over here. It's probably 2 aspects of the same god that we're talking about, and it would all just be integrated into one thing.
You hear the fable about Romulus and Remus, right? Can you tell me that fable of how Rome was founded? This is like kind of a mythological fable. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, for sure. It is one of those like these are archetypical. This is archetypical mythos, right? And what it is we have a couple of babies who were put into like a little like manger thing and sent down a river. They had to be purged because there was a king who was afraid of them. These are very standard stories. I mean, these are biblical stories in the same way. And they allegedly, wash up into some reeds, and then a wolf comes along and they suckle. Yes, there it is. They suckle at the teat of the wolf. And then they grow up big and strong, and they wind up, they do overthrow the king who was afraid of them and found their own city. And I was actually just talking about this with some friends the other day, because there's a great bit in Livy, who's one of the great, Latin historians, who was writing at
Livy?
Livy.
Livy.
Yeah, and he was around during like the age of Augustus. So he's writing about stuff like this is 750 years later, like. He's talking about this, and he's like, well, it doesn't really seem plausible that it was a wolf. So I'm thinking that maybe it was like maybe it was like a corruption of language, and that there was like a local prostitute whose name was Wolf, and she was the one who got. So it's really funny, like watching him sort of wrestle with the mythos of Rome, like even trying to make this like a true story
at that time.
Even at that time, and because he's 750 years in beyond all of that, like we go back 750 years from now, like we're like in Robin Hood days. That's how far away Livy was from the origin of his own city.
So the myth isn't true, but how did it actually begin?
In my opinion, right, and I think in the opinion of like if I was going to offer like sort of the most generalized and acceptable explanation for this, it's basically that at the Tiber River, which Rome is adjacent to and sort of runs through Rome, there was a bend in it, so there was an easy place to cross the river, to ford the river. And right next to that is a couple of prominent hills. And if you're a very, very early society and you're looking for a place to build a settlement, it's very nice to have some hills around because you can build a little fortification on top of it. And if anybody comes around to mess with you, you have a really nice defensible position. So it really seems like there were just some early people who come across these hills, who recognize that there's this nice ford in the river, and now they're sort of on the trade routes that are running like up from southern Italy into Etruria, and then deeper into the European interior and stuff that's coming down from the interior and out through southern Italy.
So location,
and then the soil around Rome and in that whole swath of Italy is very fertile. So they plop themselves down. They've got some good farms going. They've got trade routes coming through. They have a defensible position. And, they've actually done archaeological excavations, especially around the Capitoline Hill and the Palatine Hill, which is where all of this stuff got going. And, the earliest things that they find are not too far off of like this, alleged 753.
And these are some of the early findings there on Palatine Hill excavation. Wow.
That's and there's just layers and layers and layers because they built on top of what had come before them. And so
do you think we've found a lot of the stuff that's there, or do you think there's still a lot to be found?
There's always more to be found. And actually an interesting thing about just sort of archaeological theory is that some of these places that you go to, they know that there is stuff that is buried that they are intentionally not excavating, because what we have right now, the tools that we have right now for archaeology, it's inherently destructive. Like you're going to wind up destroying things in order to get at what you're looking for. And
destroying things in the ground, like
destroying things in the ground. And so there are definitely places where it's like, we know that there's stuff there. We're not going to touch it because who knows, maybe in 20 years or 30 years or 50 years, we'll have better technology and we can analyze this stuff and dig into, like maybe literally dig into this stuff without damaging as much as we know that we would damage it today.
That's pretty amazing forethought, So when you look, going back just to that fable of Remus and Romulus, right? And Romulus, Rome, that was how the name comes through the fable. Like how big was myth and fable at the time when Rome began?
Very big. Okay. I mean, this is, early human societies have all had myths and legends about their own origins. Like this is one of like the most basic things that you will find in like every society, indigenous tribes in North America, indigenous tribes in Siberia, the Native Americans. We have our own origin myths here in the United States of America right now. We've got, George Washington, like never telling a lie. Like these are myths that we, tell ourselves.
Christopher Columbus and Thanksgiving, whether there's truth to it or not, but it's still, these are myths that we tell ourselves.
Yeah. And so this is a very common thing to just all human societies. And so, yeah, them telling this story and it helps you, and it becomes less about telling an accurate story of where we came from as opposed to telling a story about what kind of society we want to be right now. What are our values? What are our morals? What is it that we take seriously? What is it that we think you should do or not do? And a lot of early Roman history, like most of the stuff that we read today to try to glean factual information from Livy, from Polybius, from Plutarch, whatever, those guys were using the past to tell moral stories for their own contemporaneous audience to get certain things across to people. Like Marius had an issue with ambition. Let's explore that. Let's talk about that. And that was really for them the purpose of history, was to tell these moral stories. And that's a very common thing in all societies, and it was certainly true for the Romans in a really big way.
Dude, having an issue with ambition, what an interesting thing.
Ambition's a dangerous thing, man. Like we can't do anything without ambition. Like nobody can do anything without ambition. I would not have done what I did without ambition. You would not be sitting here without a little bit of ambition to go.
You don't even think about it.
Yeah, you want to go do stuff, but it's like it's anything. It's everything in moderation. If you indulge too much in ambition, now you're willing to do anything and break anybody, do whatever it takes to get ahead. And now you're into hubris, and now the gods are going to punish you. And nobody wants to be in the land of hubris where the gods are like, we have to show this person who's actually in charge, and it's not him, it's the gods.